Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Great Plains Association for College Admission Counseling Virtual College Fair. And for you tonight, you guys are attending the session, College Application and Financial Aid 101. We thank you for joining us. Just a few housekeeping announcements before we get started. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenters at any time. Your cameras and microphone are turned off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. This is just one of many different sessions happening this evening, so please be sure to sign up for additional sessions. This presentation is also being recorded and will be available within about a week at strivescan.com/GPACAC. I'd now like to turn it over to Megan.
Good evening and welcome to GPACAC's Virtual College Fair. I would like to warmly welcome the students, families, and counselors spending the evening with us. We are honored to host students, families, and counselors from our 3 states, Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma. And thank you to the 145 universities that will be presenting this evening. To kick off our virtual college fair, we are pleased to provide this College Application and Financial Aid 101 panel presentation. Today's panel presentation is an opportunity for you to learn about the college application process and how to pay for college. You will hear about the college application process from 2 college counselors, Kim Urinda from Shawnee Mission West High School in Overland Park, Kansas, and Ashley Lowry from Holland Hall in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Then you will hear from Amy McQuaid, Associate Director of Admissions from Oklahoma City University, as she shares various aspects of the financial aid process. I will be answering the questions you submit in the Q&A feature, and there will be time at the end of our panel presentation for our presenters to also answer your questions. So please submit all questions in the Q&A feature. I hope you learn a lot this evening and enjoy your time with us. Ashley and Kim, take it away.
Welcome, everybody. Again, I'm Ashley Lowry from Holland Hall in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We are pleased to kind of give you some information tonight about college basics. Essentially, we want to get you guys going. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Okay, so we're going to split up a couple of topics to talk about types of admission, how to apply to college, parts of an application, and our tips for you before we kick over for the financial aid piece. Okay, so let's start with types of college admission. This is a great graphic from our National Association for College Admission Counseling, who's over Great Plains. So you feel free to take a screenshot of this page because this is a great resource for you. So let's go through some of the different types of admission. And so I'm going to start with the middle over on this left side, the non-restrictive application plans. And we're going to start with rolling admission. And this is an opportunity for students to apply to some universities beginning July 1st and others beginning August 1st. What rolling admission means is that as applications come through and the files are completed with a transcript and other necessary documents, admission offices are reviewing applications and offering decisions. And so you'll find that some schools offer decisions even in the summer, but many, even if their application opens in the summer, may not start releasing decisions until September. But rolling admission just means they're reviewing constantly until their class is full. So you might see some universities are open with their application until the end of someone's senior year. So even into the early part of the summer. So rolling admission is generous and kind of a fast process for many universities. I'm going to go to the right next and talk about early action, which is one of my favorite types of applying to college for my students. And so early action has a deadline, but it's just that. It means I'm going to apply a little earlier in the process, and then we're going to hear a little earlier in the process. So many universities will have a deadline between October 15th and November 15th. There's a few that might have a December 1st for early action. So if you apply by that point, typically we're hearing a decision by winter break, which is really nice for students to have some feedback as we go into the winter. And so that's a non-binding decision. So you can apply, be admitted, and you still have until May 1st to make a decision. Regular decision is a standard type of admission. And so typically those admission deadlines would be early January to maybe early February. And then the release date, so when students are find out about their admission decision, would be by April 1st in a normal year. This year it went until this past Tuesday, but typically students have to hear by August 1st on a regular decision. So you can see that as you think about applying, you might have classmates and students that hear in August that they've been admitted to college. And for other students, they may not hear until the end of March about their admission. And these are all, again, a non-binding decision. On the far right, we've got restrictive application plans. You'll hear people say, I applied ED, early decision. Early decision means I love this school. I've done my research, I've visited, I know it's my home, and that my family, we've researched that we know what the finances look like. And so when you do that, you sign a contract, the parents sign a contract, and the college counselor, the high school counselor signs an agreement that says, we all understand, if admitted, you are going to that university. It's a big decision. We do see perhaps that admission rates are higher with early decision. So it's a way for colleges to guarantee a certain percentage of their class early on. Restrictive early action is a little bit different. It's somewhere in between early action and early decision. So it's a non-binding decision, but you're restricted to only applying to one university early as a private school. So you can maybe apply to some public early action schools, but you can only apply to one school REA. There's only about 7 schools in the country that have restrictive early action, so it's not a huge group of schools. But again, if you're admitted, you have until May 1st to make a decision. So again, this is just a nice graphic to understand the different types of admission. How do you apply? There's a couple of different ways to apply. So the Common Application is a great tool that has public, private, international, all types of universities on it. Each year we see about 30, 35 schools join the Common Application. So some universities might have their own platform, and they also might be on the Common Application, and they might be on the Coalition application that you'll see on here. So you'll want to check each school's website, but if you look at the Common App and you see, well, 5 of my 6 schools are on the Common Application, it's one application that's common, and then there's a few separate questions per university. So it's pretty great tool so that you're not having to do the same stuff over and over. Some universities only have their own application platform still, and that's just great. And so you'll apply through their website, and you'll find everything you need on their school site. For some of our Texas friends that are on here and are going to present tonight, there's a system called Apply Texas, which would go to the Texas schools. Same thing for University of California. So they've got a system that's just for the University of California system. There's also a Cal State system that has an application. University of California systems only open the month of November. So as we look at these deadlines for other schools, this is a chance to say, well, I can apply to some schools by November 1 early action, and then I can work on my California apps if you're applying to California schools. The Coalition is one last platform, and you'll see that many of those schools are also Common App or have a different way to apply, but the University of Washington is our only school that's exclusively still on there as of this year. So those are some different application platforms on how to apply. Okay, Kim.
All right, my name's Kim Urenda, and I wanted to review parts of an application. So every application has the personal contact information. I know something I stress with my students because we've run into some issues before. Make sure you use your legal name. I've had students use nicknames. I'm Kim. My legal name is Kimberly, so I would want to apply as Kimberly. So you want to make sure you're using your legal name that matches your birth certificate and social security number. So just a blanket reminder, because again, I know sometimes we go by different names or middle names or different things. So they will ask you for your personal contact information about where you went to high school, things about your family, your address, email. Test scores. That is something, again, that a lot of schools will ask for. At this point in time, majority of the test scores, you contact the testing company. So if you took the ACT or you took the SAT, you would contact those testing companies and ask them to send your scores. Or when you were actually taking the test and registering, sometimes they give you like 4 or 5 free to send. And so some people do that. Some people prefer to wait and send them separately. It is kind of up to you as a family how you want to decide that. Now, due to COVID, many colleges are test optional, so that might not be something you have to do and could be a little bit of a savings for you. So might be worth, again, that research piece of, do they even need your test scores? I know colleges will use them if you send them. But if you're like, well, this is test optional and I don't think I really want to send that again is your choice as a family to make. The essay piece, again, is something that is very important. If the college you are applying to requires it, you definitely want to talk to your English teachers, talk to your mentors, have people proofread it. A specific platform like the Common App, for example, like Ashley shared, some of those platforms definitely has an essay. You can go online and start looking at that. I don't know if there, and maybe somebody on the call can, or on the webinar can, I don't know if they're changing the questions this year or they're keeping them the same. It seems like they do a 2-year cycle, and I haven't looked at that yet. I don't know if anybody knows that on the call. Nope. Okay. All right. So we'll go on. So, but you can see the questions. They usually give you several prompts, and you can start kind of deciding which prompt applies to you or which one you want to write on. There is always an application fee. It can range anywhere from $30 to over $100. It is non-refundable. Letters of recommendation, you do need to request those early from your teachers, counselors, coaches, anybody you're going to request a letter from. It is very helpful to include a copy of your resume or share with them some type of list of all your activities. Specific high schools might have different deadlines. So I know in some schools, they're like, everything that needs a letter of rec has to be turned in by this date. Or some schools are a little more lax and they say, okay, you need to give people 2 weeks before it's due. So you just want to check in with your counselor or who you're working with at your school. The interview process, again, some colleges will have student interviews as part of their application process. It's usually done second semester. And there are lots of things out there that you can kind of Google and see about practicing that, tips and tricks, as far as if you have to do an online interview or if you're doing an in-person interview and what that would look like to help you prepare for that. Okay, looks like there was a chat answer there, so thank you, Megan. All right, so for some extra tips, definitely doing your research on those colleges. You want to narrow your list to about 5 to 8 colleges that you apply for or to in the fall of your senior year. And I know for some families, they want to apply to more. That is up to you and your family. But if you've really done your research and really have done your visits and what is a good fit financially, you're great with a list of about 5 to 8. You do want to make sure within that 5 to 8 you have a range of schools. And what we mean by range of schools, and I've heard different terminology used, you want to have a safety school, a possible school, and maybe a dream school, or they call it a reach school. Some people say it's a meet school, like the possible, you meet all the requirements. So you want to have some of those. Again, a safety school is something you can definitely get into. Possible or meet school is something that, again, you feel pretty confident you can get into. And then a dream school might be one of those, again, very selective schools that you're applying for that would be great to get into. But again, I know sometimes the competition is stiff. So The other thing you want to do is know your audience. So when you're writing those essays or writing those reflections or answering the questions, if you're doing the Common App and each school has a specific question, you want to be mindful for who you're writing those essays and application pieces for. So it is great if you get to know the admissions counselor at that college or university, or you have an idea of who that person might be, that you're the audience you're writing towards. The other great piece I like to share with my students is it reads like a novel. So make sure you have each piece of the application, the Common App essay or your essay is one part or aspect, a letter of rec from your science teacher is one part, a letter of rec from the National Honor Society sponsor is another part, so that your person reading is not reading the same thing over and over. So that's great. And then again, get to know those admissions counselors and connect with them.
Okay, so as we wrap up just kind of the application and the admission process, Kim and I want to share some other ideas just for this whole process. So get out and visit schools. People are opening up their campuses again. So if you are a sophomore, junior family, I'd say it's time to start thinking about it. For my juniors, I'm like, let's go. Let's see if we can see something before the school year's up. So in the summer, you know that colleges don't show exactly the same as when their campuses are vibrant with students, but go visit. That students are going to know what they're looking for the more they engage with the universities, and keep attending these virtual events. I'll say something that came out of COVID is that this has been positive to connect in so many ways and to have this feature. So yes, like Kim said, know your admission counselor. They're your advocate. For their territory. They want to know you and they want to work with you to get to their school, but also know your counselor. And so some of you might attend a really large school. You just have to get to know that person too, because they have connections. They know maybe what's needed for certain applications. And so work with your counselor at your high school. And so because there's so many different ways to apply, as a family, you might think, how can I help my kiddo? Well, it's really hands off on most things, but you can maybe make a spreadsheet, something on your refrigerator door that says, what's due? What are our deadlines? Have we sent this? Have we sent scores? And be organized. And really, when I say be organized and timely, I mean, you're not going to apply on October 31st for a November 1st deadline if you can help it. So show the schools that you've got your act together, and be timely with your materials and put some good thought into it. Real advice as you guys go into starting to look at these colleges tonight and hearing what they have to say, you really want to look at their profile, and pretty soon we'll start to see the class of 2024, when they'll graduate. So right now we're looking at the kids who are graduating, but the colleges will release what that admitted student profile looked like. You want to be in that range. You can have a reach school, but some schools are a reach for everybody, but you still want to fit that admitted student profile. And this year, I mean, applications were up, students weren't able to visit schools, and admit rates were down to 3.5%. So you don't want a list of 8 schools that have a 3.5% admit rate. So come on, know a range and focus on a good match for you overall. Social, academic, admissibility total. And as a family, it's time to start really having realistic conversations with your child about your budget. There are schools that are $80,000. There are schools that are $10,000. And so where do you fit in that? And each school's website, and Amy might mention this, there's going to be a net price calculator. So we're going to talk about ways to have that realistic conversation in the next 2 years with your students. And then overall, remember, your kiddos have worked hard and they deserve everything. Every school, they're a good match, if they're applying, and some of it's out of their control. And so how you respond to their admission decisions will really say a lot. So it's a family process. We're excited that you're here tonight. And Amy, I'm going to kick it over to you to talk a little bit about money, how to finance it.
All right, thank you all. And once again, my name is Amy McQuaid, and I am the Associate Director of Admissions at Oklahoma City University in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And I'm really excited to be able to talk to you about financial aid tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to try to share it in a way where I can actually have the PowerPoint in front of me. So forgive me if we have to kind of, here we go. Can you all, oh, wait. It's still doing something funky. I apologize. Let me reshare in a way that's going to work. This is just going to be how it's going to be. All right. Can you all see my screen? Perfect. All right. So there is so much in regards to financial aid. And I know that for many families, it feels really overwhelming and really scary. So the first and probably most important piece of advice I want to provide you with, and I want you to leave with, is that every institution is going to be a little different, but those financial aid offices at each institution are going to be there to help you. So never be afraid in this process to reach out to the colleges that your student is considering and ask questions. I'm going to go through a lot of different resources and ways that you can do that on your own, but there is nothing like getting someone on the phone to reassure you and to answer those questions. So please, please, please never feel like you have to have all the answers, and no question is small or silly, especially when it comes to financial aid. So we are going to talk about the cost of college, and that's what I'm going to start with because I think that's a really important aspect to give context to the rest of the presentation. Then we're going to talk about what financial aid is, the different types of financial aid that are available to you. And then finally, the different ways that you can go about financing your college process. And then at the end, if we have time, I have a couple of timeline things that you can be thinking about, especially for those rising seniors for your fall and spring semesters of your senior year. So let's start by talking about net price. And I know Ashley started talking about this with net price calculators. Net price is the amount that a student's going to pay for their college education after financial aid has been applied, financial aid being scholarships and grants. And it's really, really important to consider the net price when you're looking at colleges, not the sticker price. You all probably have heard the term sticker shock, where you look at the cost of an institution and you think, oh my gosh, I could never afford to attend that school. Well, hold on, because many students do not pay the sticker price. So it's really important to take advantage of the net price calculators that are available on every institution's website. It's, I believe, a federal requirement if they receive federal financial aid. So you can actually go out tonight. There's even a website on the federal, on studentaid.gov, where you can find all of the net price calculators and just search your college or colleges that you're interested in. Or I just like to go out to Google and type in my college name and net price calculator, and it usually gives you that net price calculator. And you can go in and enter the student's information and your family's information, and it's going to give you a best guess estimate based on the information that you provide on what it thinks it's going to cost for you to attend that institution. A couple of things to think about is that when you use the net price calculators, you're going to be able to better compare the cost of college from college to college without just looking at that sticker price. And it's also going to widen your opportunities, right? It's going to allow you to see, maybe I can look at more institutions than I thought. It's also really, really important for you to be as accurate as possible with the information that you're giving in your net price calculator, but realize that you are only receiving an estimate. So this is not a contract with you and the school. This is just something to give you a really good place to start. And then once again, call and ask questions if you feel like you're not quite sure what's going on with that net price calculator. But definitely that is something you could start tonight. You can work on that this summer. And I encourage families to start building a budget. Kim and Ashley talked about that. Start building yourself a spreadsheet of what your different colleges may cost, the different costs associated, which I'll get to here in just a minute. And then make sure that you're really prepared for whatever colleges your student applies for to meet that financial aid process for that college. So let's talk a little bit about cost. You're going to hear the term cost of attendance a lot. Now, a lot of people, when they think about attending a university, they think about the billable costs, or what financial aid calls direct costs, the things like your tuition and fees and your on-campus room and board. Now, these are the things that your institution is directly going to bill you for. Whatever institution you pick and you enroll at that institution, you're going to get a bill for tuition and fees and your room and board if you choose to live on campus. You may also get a bill for books if you charge it to your student account. Not super important right now. But there are other expenses to college, and it's really important to have this conversation now as a family, as you're deciding what kinds of universities, where you're going to be looking at universities. So these are called indirect costs. The first are books and supplies. The federal government says about $1,500 a year should be your estimate. You can estimate whatever you would like in that column, but most financial aid packages are going to estimate right around $1,500 for that. If you decide to live at home, or if you decide to live off campus, you're still going to have living expenses. So it's really important to think through what those might look like. You're going to have personal or miscellaneous expenses. So things that you haven't thought of, maybe things to decorate your dorm room, or maybe you're going to need a laptop and you don't have one, or you need to update your laptop before you go to college. And then finally, travel costs. If you're looking at a college that's just down the road and you're going to live at home, think about what a parking permit is going to cost. Think about what the cost of gas is going to look like. Maybe maintenance on your car. I know that that seems excessive, but why not think through all of those elements? But if you're thinking, if you live on, in Oklahoma, and you're thinking of going up to the Northeast, you probably are looking more at plane tickets instead of gas. So it would be really important to think through what are those average travel costs each year going to be if your student flies to school, comes home for fall break, comes home for Thanksgiving break, winter break, spring break, and then finally at the end of the year. So just kind of thinking through and estimating out those costs, but know that those aren't going to be charged directly by the institutions. And of course, there might be other fees. There might be student organizations, Greek life that your student might decide to get involved in that might have some extra cost. So be mindful of those. All of these things added together are going to be individual to each institution, and all of those things added together is going to come to the cost of attendance for that specific institution. So note that cost of attendance is going to be different at every school. So what does financial aid exactly mean? So financial aid refers to all of the funding resources that are available to a student to help them pay for their college education. Now, I want to talk about the types. There are 4 main categories of financial aid. The first 2 categories are what we consider gift aid, or things that you don't have to pay back, probably the most exciting aid in many students' minds. The first one is scholarships. Now, scholarships we're going to get to in more detail, but these are things that are usually based on merit or athletics or skill or something along those lines. Grants are generally based on financial need, and those are going to be determined by things like the FAFSA or the CSS Aid Profile. Now, the second, or the bottom 2, I'm sorry, there you go, grants popped up on your screen, sorry. Now, the next 2 categories are going to be called self-help aid. So the first is loans, which you all are probably familiar with. I know loan is a dirty word, but I want to tell you that's the reality for many families to be able to afford college is to at least consider and have that conversation about loans. And the most important thing with loans, we'll talk about it again, only borrow what you need, and you'll only know that if you sit down and do the work before your student goes to college. And then repayment usually begins on those loans after your student is finished with their education or falls below half time. And then finally, work study, which many of you are probably familiar with. Work study is something that's going to be an on-campus job. It can either be need-based through the federal government, or sometimes you'll hear something called institutional, where the university or college devotes a certain amount of funds to providing student jobs on campus. Generally, they are minimum wage in whatever state your student is attending, but they can be more, especially if you're looking at a more skilled position. And then it's about 10 to 15 hours a week, so incredibly doable. I always have to talk my families into considering federal work study or work study, because I know as a student, I did it in both my undergrad and grad. So don't worry too much about work study being too much of a burden, because it's really built so that students can do it in conjunction with their college work. All right, so there are 4 types of resources that might help you pay for college. You might be going, okay, I know the cost, I know the different types of aid, but how am I actually going to pay for it? So there are university resources, things like scholarships, we'll get to those. There are community resources, also things like scholarships. Then there are student and family resources. So resources you may have individually as a family to help pay for college. And then finally, there are federal and state resources. And those are going to be specifically tied to the FAFSA and the CSS Aid Profile. So let's talk about university resources. So scholarships are going to be based on athletic talent, maybe musical talent, theater talent, dance talent, art. So like a portfolio submission, but they could also be based on leadership or service. So scholarships are going to run the gamut, and they're going to be specific to each institution. So it's going to change from school to school. And it's really, really important that you're checking those schools' websites to find out what resources are there. Another university resource is need-based aid. And we're going to talk about how schools determine need-based aid here in just a minute, but essentially need-based aid is there to help fill the gap. So what your family can afford to attend versus what the cost of attendance is at that institution. And then, as I mentioned, go out and do your research, look at all of the scholarship opportunities at each college you're looking at. What are the requirements? What are the deadlines? Do you have to fill out extra applications for your scholarships, or are they going to consider you just based on the application materials that you submit? That is going to be specific to each institution, and that is something you should add to your handy dandy spreadsheet or create a bookmark of all of those scholarship pages, whatever you need to stay organized. It's going to be really important to do that for the colleges you're really interested in. And then finally, don't forget to contact your Office of Admissions. Ashley and Kim talked about reaching out to your college counselor or your college admissions counselor often. We are your advocates, and we can't advocate for you if we don't know who you are. And you become more and more of a real person the more we connect. And that is true of scholarship opportunities as well. I can't advocate for a special scholarship opportunity on behalf of a student if I've never really had the chance to get to know you. So make sure your student is reaching out, asking questions, building those relationships. So let's talk a little bit about need-based aid and how institutions determine that. So I have a couple of different examples. Remember that cost of attendance we talked about, all of the different things that come together to form what an institution costs. They're going to subtract out your estimated family contribution, or EFC, which is determined by your FAFSA, and that is going to equal your financial need. Now let's talk, just to give you a little example. Let's say it is $40,000. That's your cost of attendance to attend a certain institution. But your family's EFC is $36,000. You are not automatically, but you are eligible at that point for $4,000 in need-based aid, but no more than $4,000. So you can't receive need-based aid or financial aid above and beyond the cost of an institution or cost of attendance at each institution. So your need-based will actually change depending on the different institutions that you apply to. So that funding gap is going to be different. So you may see very different financial aid packages from institution to institution, but it's important just to understand how institutions are using the data that they're receiving to determine what your family's need is. It's also important to recognize that a lot has changed thanks to COVID for many families. And because the FAFSA uses prior year tax information, you must be your own advocate and reach out to financial aid offices if what is represented for your family on the FAFSA or on your CSS Aid profile is not an accurate depiction of where you are right now. So that's going to be really important for you to think about as you're filling out the FAFSA and the CSS Aid profile if that's required for you. So let's talk a little bit about what EFC is. I know that this can be a mystery, how the FAFSA actually determines. So it's going to take into account a few different factors. So the amount that the student's parents will be asked to pay based on income and assets, the amount a student can contribute based on their earnings or savings, your family size, the age of the oldest parent, the number of children currently attending college. Hold the phone on that one. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. And then, of course, special circumstances. So what I mentioned to you, health-related expenses, loss of property or death in the family. The FAFSA is going to try to take into account as much of that as possible, but it's going to take prior year. So for our rising seniors, you're going to fill out the 2022-2023 FAFSA starting in October 1st, but you're going to use your 2020 taxes. So if there's a whole year in there where things might have changed. So it's important to recognize that you might still have to have a conversation. So let's talk about community resources. So we talked about what a university may be able to provide you, but there are lots and lots of outside scholarships available to students. There are national, there are state, there are local, there are organizations that are devoted to states or even specific high school opportunities. So it's going to be important to research your opportunities. And then these, my favorite part about outside scholarships is they're not usually bound to a specific type of educational expense when it comes to college. So many university scholarships are going to be tuition bound. Say they may only be able to qualify or count towards your tuition costs, but maybe not your room and board. but an outside scholarship can come in and help pay for those extra costs. Very few outside scholarships have really big restrictions on them. We have one that says it can pay for any educational expense except for room and board, but that's one of the only ones that I've seen that is super specific like that. So keep in mind that outside scholarships can create more flexibility, and oftentimes outside scholarships can apply to many different institutions, not just one. So it is worth your time to consider those. I've created this little chart just to give you an idea of the different kinds of resources. So first we have your local, and your high school counselor is going to be your best one-stop shop to know what resources are specific to your high school. There's also going to be state-specific scholarship organizations that you should take a look at. There might be school organization or clubs that you might be able to apply for scholarships through. And then of course, local businesses, churches, organizations. We've had students whose parents' place of work actually provides scholarships. We've had students get scholarships from their church or from larger religious-based organizations. So do your research, know your opportunities. And then there are, of course, these online scholarship resources. So fastweb.com, probably the one that's talked about the most. It is the largest scholarship search engine. It is probably one of the oldest scholarship search engines. So it's massive. It takes some time to sort through FastWeb, but it is worth your time. So set aside some time for a couple of weeks to sort through FastWeb and figure out what you might qualify for and want to apply for, but you won't regret it. Collegeboard.com is a great one. Scholarshipamerica.org, .org on both of those. Sally Mae, and then I mentioned state specific. One major organization for the state of Oklahoma is Oklahoma City Community Foundation, or OCCF.org. Please talk to your high school counselors about organizations that might exist in your state if you don't live in Oklahoma. All right, so let's talk more about scholarships. You must be smart about scholarships. And that's beyond just meeting the deadlines and meeting the requirements. There are thousands of scholarships out there. Some of them you're going to be considered for automatically when you apply. Some of them you're going to have to put in some work. So you, as a rising senior, as a sophomore, you can start doing that research now. You can start thinking about what scholarship organizations you're going to go to. You might start making a list of the national scholarships you're going to apply to and when those deadlines are. So do your research, get some motivation there, but spread it out, because it can feel like a lot on top of applying for college. And then the most important thing I can tell you is never pay money to apply for an outside scholarship. If you are being asked to pay something, you need to be in your high school counselor's office saying, hey, is this legit? Because there's a good chance it's not. So let's talk about student and family resources. These are things that your family can use to help pay for college. So things like college savings plan, if your family has one, family and student savings that you might have been saving towards college, family job earnings, student job earnings, private loan financing. So if you wanted to go above and beyond or outside of what you might be offered through the FAFSA from the federal government, and then gifts or support from extended family. So this is where having that conversation with your family is really important, because your family may not have any of these. They might have something that you don't realize. So it's really important for your family to sit down and say, what can I realistically pay each year for college? And then you can take that knowledge into your net price calculator research and really know what institutions you can realistically apply for, or make it known early on that financial aid is going to be really important to you. And that way your counselor can advocate for you through the process. So let's talk about federal and state resources. So this is where we're going to get into like the FAFSA. So let's talk about the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. And the most important word there, you probably noticed, is free. You should never pay money to fill out the FAFSA. If you get somewhere and you're starting the FAFSA and it's saying, okay, I need you to pay however much money, you're not at the right website. You need to be at studentaid.gov and you need to be filling out the FAFSA there. So make sure that you're in the right place when you start filling out your FAFSA. Now the FAFSA opens up every year on October 1st for the following school year. So like I said, rising seniors, you're looking at fall 2022 as your start term for your college. So you are going to fill out in the fall of 2021, wow, that's crazy, the 2022-2023 FAFSA. The 2021-2022 FAFSA will still be out there, PS, so don't pick the wrong one or you'll have to do FAFSA twice. It's no fun. But October 1 is that date. And then the FAFSA is going to allow colleges, there's what the FAFSA website looks like, the link to the website. The FAFSA is going to allow colleges to look at your family specific financial situation and determine what grants you might qualify for, what kinds of student loans you might qualify for, and if you qualify for federal work study. And then many institutions may use that to also determine if you're going to qualify for some special scholarships or special school grants. So please, please, please file your FAFSA. Each year, the federal government awards roughly $150 billion in aid through the FAFSA. So filing the FAFSA actually makes sure that you're in the running. So many families say, well, I'm not going to qualify for aid. We make too much. But here's the thing about the FAFSA. It's free. They're going to make it easier in a couple of years. Yes, I know it's time consuming now, but it's worth putting in the effort. You don't have to use any of the resources that are provided to you through the FAFSA, but you won't know what kind of resources are available to you until you actually submit your FAFSA. Some institutions will actually require it for institutional scholarships. So making sure that you're paying attention to what those requirements are, and then making sure that you're paying attention to deadlines when it comes to the FAFSA. You might be saying, wait, October 1st, but I've got a deadline. And the answer is yes. So I actually pulled Kansas, Nebraska, and Oklahoma's deadline, but you can see a link if you live outside of those. And every year they're going to update it because every year it's going to change. It's really important to understand that there's a difference between what the federal government has in funding and what your individual state has in funding. And that changes year to year based on what your state legislation decides, or state Congress decides that it's going to do in regards to financing for college. So for Kansas, your deadline for this year is April 1st. So make sure you get your FAFSA in no later than April 1st to guarantee that you'll be considered for whatever funding you might be eligible for. For Oklahoma, it is as soon as possible. They used to have a December 1st deadline, but the long and short of it is they run out of funding. So the earlier you can get your FAFSA in after October 1 opens up, the better your chance of being considered for the aid you are likely to qualify for and to receive that aid. And then for Nebraska, it is actually school by school specific. So you're going to need to talk to the financial aid offices at your school. And then once again, you shouldn't have to pay to fill out the FAFSA. It's free. So I want you to be organized and gather the appropriate documents. There is a lot of information at studentaid.gov about what those are. There's some really cool infographics you can look at. The two most important things for you to consider are an FSA ID and the IRS data retrieval tool. I don't have a lot of time to talk about those now, but go out and do your research. A few other resources that are available that I want you to know about is the FAFSA Forecaster. This is going to help you estimate out what you may qualify for through the FAFSA. It's important to remember that you've also got to apply for aid every year. So just because you filled out the FAFSA this year doesn't mean that you don't have to fill it out next year, because your family's financial situation may change from year to year. And then students are not considered independent, meaning that they don't have to submit parent information on the FAFSA until they're 24 years old, they're married, or they have a dependent of their own that they provide the majority of the support for. So another important thing in the financial aid process, watch for emails or letters from your schools asking for additional documentation and get those in as soon as possible. Some financial aid offices may only email your student email, so your email that you've been given from that specific institution, to keep things as secure and safe as possible. So know how each institution is going to differ. And then know that the FAFSA is going to be changing. The EFC is becoming the Student Aid Index. The FAFSA is actually simplifying. It's going from something like more than 100 questions down to 36, but there are other changes that are happening on the FAFSA. So do your research, but know those changes aren't coming until 2023, 2024 FAFSA. So not next year, but the year after. Now, I did mention the CSS Aid Profile. This is something that certain schools require, but not all schools require. So it's important to know what's required at each of your institutions. You may be required to fill out the FAFSA and the CSS Financial Aid Profile. So do your research, know the difference, know that the CSS Financial Aid Profile does not, or is not free. So you will be asked to pay money to fill out your CSS Aid Profile, but it could pay off if you're going to be receiving some additional financial aid from your institutions. So ask all the questions you need to. It's also available on October 1st. You use your College Board account to access it. Once again, may be required by certain colleges and universities, and it's in addition to the FAFSA. So you're not going to be asked to do the CSS Aid Profile and not the FAFSA. You will always do the FAFSA and maybe the CSS Aid Profile. So know what's different from school to school. And then take steps to minimize debt. Once again, talk as a family, know what it's going to cost or what you're able to do, and don't borrow more than you need on loans. That's how students get themselves into trouble. So please, please, please do your research. I don't know, how are we doing on time? Do I have like no minutes? Am I -4? 1 minute? Okay. So let's just kind of talk through things that you can do. Apply for admission in the fall semester, choose top choice universities, not I only want to go here and I'm applying to 5 more because, you know, they're just my backups. Make sure you actually like the schools you're applying to. Apply for university-based scholarships, making sure you're paying attention to deadline. Apply for local and other scholarships, making sure you're paying attention to deadlines. Apply for your federal and state aid using the FAFSA as early as October 1st. And then also, if it's required, the CSS Aid Profile as early as October 1st. And then the spring, you're going to review your financial aid awards and compare the aid offers with the cost to attend at each school. So you're going to sit down, you're going to grab your spreadsheet, you're going to kind of reach out and do your fancy calculations and figure out what it's going to cost. But please set up financial aid meetings. Some schools offer financial aid interviews or money talks where they'll sit down and analyze your financial aid package with you to help you understand exactly what it is going to cost. Make your final decision on where to attend, and then make sure you follow the instructions to accept your aid at that institution. So don't forget to actually hit the yes, I want that in your financial aid package, and every university is going to be a little differently. And then finally, pay attention to the completion of financial aid details and payments deadlines at your school. Every school is going to be different. Some might even have payment plans that your family can use to help afford your payments. So overall, take action early, whether that be in the college application process or the financial aid process. Early applicants maximize their overall potential for aid. So do yourself a favor, do your research now, know your plan, and ask all the questions along the way. Thank you. I know that was long. We would love to know what questions you have.
I am going to jump in and thank everyone for joining us today. Unfortunately, we are at the end of time, so our session is coming to a close. Students, when you close this window, there will be a link to a very quick 4-question survey, and we'd appreciate any feedback you can provide. In about a week, you'll be able to find this session's recording, as well as all the other sessions recordings that are happening this evening at strivescan.com/GPACAC. Also, don't forget, there are additional sessions happening right after this, so please be sure to sign up for more. Thank you all so much, and thank you to our wonderful panelists for sharing some great information, and I hope everyone has a good evening.